Hello, this is Nick here from Gorgon Reviews. Today I'm talking with Heidi Ewing, co-director of the documentary Folktales. Folktales is a story about folk high schools in the Arctic area of Norway, where kids can go for a year to learn wilderness survival skills and how to dog sled. Thank you so much for spending time here today, Heidi.
And it's my pleasure.
Starting question, what is the first movie you remember seeing in theaters?
Vertigo. I saw Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock. It was in re-release. I saw it when I was I was like 9 years old, and my brother was grounded, and my parents went out to a party, and we took their car and we went down to the Old Redford Theater in Detroit, where he'd heard this movie was playing, this old movie that was supposed to be cool, and he was really into old movies. And so we went, and there was all these like much older people there, like singing. This organist was playing, and they were like singing, like "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" and stuff. And then the movie started, and it like changed my life. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo was just like I didn't know a film could be so haunting and powerful and gripping and emotional, and it's just burned into my brain.
Well, in industry terms, you've been working with Rachel Grady for practically forever, so like 2 decades or so. But you started a company together and you've co-directed so many documentaries, including this one. How'd you meet and how did you get the partnership started?
We both were hired to work on a really weird documentary about the Church of Scientology. And the guy who owned the company like didn't have time to direct it. And so we were very, very young. And I somehow like talked my way into this job. And she was my associate producer. And she was in New York and I was in LA. And we basically didn't really know what we were getting into with the Church of Scientology at the time. And they would like, it was a very strange experience. So we just thought it was very funny and that we sort of were being intimidated, and so we started like prank calling the Church of Scientology at night and doing stupid things, and while we were making the film just to like entertain ourselves, and we just realized we had like a fearlessness and also like the same sense of humor, and we just got on great, and we eventually started Loki Films in 2001 in my apartment. We like worked for this guy for a couple of years and then decided we wanted to start our own business. And even though we didn't know what we were doing, we did it anyway. And so we've been making films together and had a production company ever since.
This next part's a lot of setup for the questions, so sorry on that. But I know personally when I was growing up, I watched a lot of movies, but never really watched documentaries. I just assumed as a kid and teenager it was all about nature and history. Uh, and like I heard the name Michael Moore before, but like that was like my level of documentary knowledge. And then in college, I heard about Jesus Camp. So it was about 2 years after its release. I watched it with my like four roommates at the time, and we were all just so horrified and shocked, and just loved that documentary. I personally attribute my current love of watching documentaries to that point of watching Jesus Camp in college before I started branching off and seeing a lot more. So first part, thank you. And second, how often does that documentary still get brought up to you almost 20 years later?
All the time. People are obsessed with Jesus Camp. It's kind of become a little bit of a cult classic, which I think is really cool. Speaking of Michael Moore, his festival, he used to have the Traverse City Film Festival in Northern Michigan, in my home state. And it was they gave it best horror film as the award. And I was like, wow, that's cool, I guess. So, it really struck a nerve. We didn't know when we were making it. I mean, we thought it was wild, but we thought it was sort of we were capturing like this one moment in time, like the height of the Christian right when it came to sort of their alliance with politicians. But it turned out to be the beginning of like the rest of the Republican Party. It turned out to be the beginning of this alliance between the Christian right and the Republican Party, and we didn't know that. And so it was weirdly prescient, I guess, and it just is sticky. It's a sticky movie that if you watch it, aside from like, the sort of like crappy look in terms of like the DV cameras, like technology is much better with lenses and stuff right now, and just the quality of the image. But aside from that, if you watch it now, it feels super relevant. It doesn't feel dated at all, which is really strange.
How do you decide on a topic to make a documentary on? Do the outside groups find you, or are you both doing research to find one?
No one has ever found us. We've always, every single film we've ever made came from our brains and our own development and like a gut instinct or a conversation we overheard, our own research, every one of them. I mean, I'd love for someone to bring me a great movie, but it hasn't happened yet. Um, I, um, yeah, like for us, there's like a checklist almost, like a mental checklist of what makes a good documentary. There's got to be something at stake. We do observational cinema, so cinema verite. So we have to believe that the person we're filming will be different by the end than they were at the beginning, that there's a possibility over time that they're going to change in some way. Um, and it has to be cinematic and visual. So like a lot of, times I think there's our films are made about a topic and not a character. So we do character-driven films and it has to have like there has to be a reason it's being used in the visual medium because you can always make a podcast or write an article. You don't not everything should be a film. And so for us, we have like a metric that we look at to see if it has legs, and that there's something interesting to look at besides a good story.
So for Folktales, how did you get the ball rolling on that one?
I read an autobiography by Blair Braverman called Welcome to the Goddamn Ice Cube, and she's an American dog sledder. And she had attended a folk high school when she was 17, and it was like a small part of the book. And it just stuck in my brain, like, what's a folk high school? And then started doing research and realized that there's still 400 of them all over Scandinavia. It's a Scandinavian concept developed in Denmark. And basically, the idea is it's not really, it's like a gap year or a fifth year of high school where somebody goes to build their character and confront their fears and do something they've never done before. And they come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. And in Norway, a lot of the folk high schools are physically challenging, like the Pasvik Folk High School where we filmed Folktales. And we were intrigued and we started talking to the schools. And then we went and visited five of them in March 2023. And when we got to Pasvik Folk High School, we met the dog sledding teachers and met the dogs. And we thought this is a really interesting way to spend a year. Like, who comes all this way to the Arctic Circle and why do they come here? And what are they after? And that was intriguing enough for us to pursue a film.
This is not the first time you had to make a documentary about like an education system because you had the Boys of Baraka, Jesus Camp kind of different shorts you've done. Why does this subject matter keep popping up for you?
It's a really good question. I mean, we look at this film as a back to basics from the Boys of Baraka, which was our first film in 2005, which followed a group of at-risk young men um, from Baltimore City to Kenya, East Africa, where they spent a year in basically the bush of Africa. And they changed a great deal, and it just, you know, capturing somebody in a moment of change when the personality isn't fully formed, where anything's possible for a young person. It's just interesting to us as filmmakers because I think people's capacity for change changes. It is reduced, I guess, over time in their 30s and up. And I think that we like to capture people when we're at this crossroads and they're making a decision. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? What's out there for me? Who am I? What am I good at? What am I afraid of? Those are dramatic, personal human questions. And we like to be there when people are trying to answer it. So for us, it's just something we have in common. We're just very drawn to those pivotal moments in a young life.
For this documentary, how'd you pick your leads? For example, did you just film every student like really in depthly and then choose the three at the end, or did you pick a few and then get lucky?
Well, we met all the students, some on Zoom the summer before they came to the school. Some we didn't meet till we got to the school. We interviewed, of course, all of them. But already before school started, we had identified two of the subjects, Hege and Bjorn Tor. And we just had met them on Zoom and we were intrigued by their stories and about what they were after. And they seemed to want to change. They seemed to want something different in their lives. So we started filming them before they went to school in the summer. And then we met Roman on campus and he was very vulnerable and very truthful and honest about his insecurities, about his social anxiety. And he was very disarming because he was so honest. And so we filmed those three primarily, but we filmed, obviously we filmed with other students as well, but we kind of zeroed in on those three early on in the process.
What was the hardest part about making folk tales for you?
It was really cold in the Arctic Circle. It was very dark for many months. And technically it was very challenging because, our cameras would break, the batteries would die, the drone would fall out of the sky. Photographing dog sledding is nearly impossible. You can't have multiple people on a sled. It's bad for the dogs. You need a snowmobile, you need drones, you need GoPros, you need gimbals, you need rigs. And so it was technically very, very complicated to make the film. I think that would be the hardest part.
As a documentarian, and there's no right or wrong answer here, don't worry, but do you consider yourself a journalist?
I do not consider myself a journalist. I consider the work I do journalistic. We're like cousins of journalists, but they have different kind of rules. They don't oftentimes get to use like music and fancy editing and flights of fancy. And this is a very authored work. It's our take on this experience. Another filmmaker would have made a very different film. So I feel like the who, what, why, when, where of journalism is a little bit more rigorous and rigid, I'd say, than what we do. And documentaries have animation, and like it's just, I think it's a journalistic work. It's a work of truth. But we're not constrained in the same way a journalist is, and mercifully so. I'm glad they're constrained because they're bringing us the news. But that's not what I'm doing here.
Did you personally get to learn to dog sled while you were up there?
I got on a sled like once or twice. It was really, really fun. The dogs are amazing beasts and incredibly strong, wild kind of creatures. And I'm a total dog person all day long. But, we mainly left that for the students. And I was more worried about getting the shot.
Finally, what do you hope viewers get out of watching Folktales?
I think that the film can teach us a lot of things, but it's a really complicated world right now, and we're all assaulted by information and technology, and we're kind of slaves to our phones and to our computers. And this film watches what happens when people go back to the basics, when they like put their phones down and they walk into the woods
Mm,
and they kind of find themselves there. And it was really, really weird because I described this film as like, an intrepid group of Norwegians and Americans walk into like a dark, dark, enchanted cold forest, and weirdly like they see the future, and the future is like a lot brighter than you think it might be. And these students are what's coming next, and these young people. So I found it very life affirming. But I think just walking away from all of our the ease of our lives, how easy everything is, been made easy for us, and trying to do hard things in nature, I think that we could all benefit from that. So I think that's one of the takeaways.
Once again, thank you so much for spending time answering some questions about your documentary Folktales. Specifically, Folktales will be playing at the Cascadia International Women's Festival this year on Saturday, April 26th. You should absolutely go and see this documentary. It's great, and bonus points you get to support two women directors at the same time. Uh,
Yeah, I love
Perfect for
it.
a women's film festival.
Thanks so much.